All right, welcome back to the show, everybody. Welcome, Shannon, again, back to the show. Shannon's a regular, so no need for an introduction there, unless you guys haven't tuned into the show. But Shannon owns and operates short-term rentals in the Northeast. Shannon, I really kind of wanted to pick your brain a little bit. We've talked about the economics of short-term rentals in the past and how they make sense, financially, things like that. We haven't talked really about, kind of the safety and security aspects of short-term rentals. So this is kind of a two-part question because you've got guests, but you also have your property. So how do you manage, from a safety and security aspect, the stays, guests and your property ultimately?
Yeah, when it comes from the guest part, before they even book, there's different services like AutoHost or Safely that do many background checks or guest screenings, and they basically they do like a risk assessment on the guest to determine if it's a high risk probability of them partying or being an issue at the property or not. So those services are available for hosts, and depending on the type of property you have, it may be worth it to invest. But if not, hosts can just simply check if the profile of the guests, see how many times have they used the platform. Like, we have a policy that we don't allow a guest who has 0 reviews book last minute and only for one night. That just screams maybe a party.
Yeah,
So so it's a guest screening is very, very important, and that's it's just different tools that you can use or strategies to protect yourself when it comes to that. The other thing is more so setting up clear guest rules, expectations around who do you call if there's an emergency. So if there is an issue at the property, once the guest gets in, who do they go to so they can resolve it quickly enough. Um, um, and then also when it comes to safety, I mean, basic things like smoke detector. I can't even tell you how many times smoke detectors go off. Like, we get notifications all the time about smoke detectors, and you don't
yeah,
want your house burned down.
yeah,
So, and it's something that owners just don't check. They don't really do a good job at doing the annual checks of the smoke
true,
detectors and carbon monoxide detectors.
right. From like back to the guest thing for a second, you mentioned doing extensive guest screening. Um, and I'm not an expert on this. That's why you're on the show. But Airbnb, they technically run the screen for the guest, right? Do you have the ability to do a secondary screen on the guest that Airbnb they found you through that channel?
So this is actually new. So Airbnb started, I think they work with one of the providers that I mentioned, that helps do a little bit of a screening. Um, and so we supplement that too, and we just do an additional check just to make sure. But Airbnb has improved their system where they're doing some checks in terms of credit cards and
Yeah,
validating. We've also, sometimes, Airbnb won't deny, I guess, if they had a bad review from a previous host. So we'll look, some of our high-end properties, we'll look to see if they've had really bad reviews.
yeah.
And we may deny, I guess, if we don't feel comfortable with
Okay.
previous.
Do you cancel that guest or do you just not approve them? Can they book without your approval and then you have to cancel it or what?
Yeah, it's really rare that we do it, because we set up, what's the term, where the guest can book automatically.
Yeah, auto booking.
Auto booking, there you go. Auto booking. But there are cases where we'll, after the guest books and we get more information, that we just don't feel comfortable. And it's rare, like really, really rare. But we will cancel if there is a concern. Like, sometimes it'll come out where they say, "Oh, I'm here for a bachelorette party weekend, and we're all staying in the home, and we have just a no strict, party policy."
Yep.
So we'll deny the guests after the fact because we realize that they're going to be having a party there. So.
Yep. Smart. So from an insurance standpoint, back to Airbnb again, I pick on them because they're the only platform I really know about and have experience with, but they provide, AirCover insurance. So do you put consideration into what channels, you work with, whether it's Expedia or VRBO or a direct booking, or do you feel more comfortable using Airbnb because they have AirCover insurance? Can you buy insurance outside of the platform?
Yeah, this is all really new because about 10 years when I started, most insurance companies didn't have a short-term rental policy or of the sort. So now, because they typically considered commercial use, and you can't do commercial use out of your residential home because
Right.
that's opens you up to a whole much, more liability and risk. So as of late, these insurance companies have gotten a little bit more savvy, and they'll have these plans where they'll add on to your policy to cover those short-term rentals. So what I tell every single owner that we work with, or any host that's interested in going into Airbnb, is looking at your policy, because most owners would just re-up whatever the policy they had from the year before and not really look to see what's actually covered. So seeing if short-term rentals are covered and adding that on. And if you can't, because some insurance companies don't cover it, there's companies like Rental Guardian, Safely also has it as well. There's a few companies you can Google out there and add an additional coverage to what you already have. The beauty about Airbnb, and that makes it actually a more optimal platform, because they have the $1 million liability, guest liability coverage. So there is a lot of security in that you feel as a host, you're like, okay, let me just keep it that. But you got to understand, Airbnb, they charge you for it. So they charge the 15% commission. They charge the commission for it. And so depending on what type of business you're in, you may want to, supplement that and, get your direct bookings, use other platforms like booking.com, which does not provide insurance, and you're going to have to self-insure. And there's different ways you can protect yourself that way, but it's really important that you get some coverage because, anything could happen. Someone could slip and fall and you would be responsible.
Oh man. I mean, there's so many things. I mean, a guest could leave the stove on, your house burns down, right? I mean,
That part.
you have to put that on your insurance. I mean, a lot of people are, I guess, have a negative opinion because they heard from somewhere, that Airbnb doesn't pay out on the AirCover claims. Like, have you noticed that to be true at all? Or do you feel like, they're pretty reasonable about claims?
They are pretty reasonable, but you also need to, stand your ground and fight a little bit sometimes and submit. And sometimes if you're denied the first time, escalating it, submit more documentation and escalating. We have a woman on our team who's just a pro at it. She knows what to submit. You have to document it really well. But I really encourage you to just continue making sure it's all documented when you submit your claim, because if you don't have any evidence of it, then it makes it a little bit hard for them to honor them.
Oh, well, look, I mean, that's like any insurance policy. I was in the insurance business for, 13 years, and you can't make a few $1,000 insurance claim and have no documentation, right? I mean, so there's got to be a little bit for, give and take. But finally, Shannon, I've only got a couple minutes left, but what are some of the things that that an owner can deploy from a technology standpoint, rather? Smart locks, cameras. I mean, how do you deploy some of those items in your Airbnb? Is it worth it?
This is one of my favorite topics, because I think this is kind of where we have a little bit of a competitive advantage, is where we really embrace technology. And when you think about technology, I think about three things that every host should have. Smart lock, security camera, and I like to call it noise monitor. There's a company called Minut that I love using. And so just breaking it down, smart lock, for obvious reasons, you can kind of control when the guests can come in and out the home, right? That's important, because you don't want them coming in a day early, right? You want to control, and you just, the smart locks can kind of gauge when the cleaning people are there, when the maintenance people are there. You can deny access. We had an issue where a guest was partying and they left the house, and we were telling them that, they need to be out. They were partying, whatever it may be. They were causing issues, being too loud. And we were able to lock them out of the house remotely until I got over. So very important to have the smart locks. But when it comes to the cameras, the one thing I just want to say, and just a rule of thumb, is no cameras inside to protect people's privacy. I think there's a lot of news articles about guests being spied on in the bathroom or something like that. So no cameras inside, but cameras are key. And then with the noise monitor, this is kind of a newer technology, but I highly recommend it, because that noise monitor will tell you if the noise level gets above a certain level, and it'll automatically send you a text, and you can set it up to send a guest a text to say, hey, we hear the noise is a certain point, level. Is there a party? You can check in. And with that noise monitor, it also tells you if there's a sound of an alarm. So if the smoke alarm goes off, I get notified of the smoke alarm, because the smoke alarm goes off and no one's there. Who hears it? The house can burn down. They left the stove on, they're out. who hears it? So noise monitor, those 3 devices are just key in terms of technology from a host perspective and safety.
Good. Well, Shannon, I appreciate it. I've run out of time again, but thanks for being on the show and talking us through those some of those issues. I got way more questions, so we'll have you on again soon. So thanks again, and we'll be right back, everybody.
I always feel like I'm rambling, but yeah.